Hello, everyone. My name is Allison.
And I'm Claire, and welcome to the Corporate Catholic Podcast. Thank you so much to Focus and Max Studios for allowing us to be here today. We're really excited, and this is our first time doing a live podcast at Seek, so we're just so grateful to be with you all today.
Yeah, so for those of you who have never heard of the Corporate Catholic Podcast before, our mission is to really inspire the joyful hustle by integrating a relationship with God into the 9 to 5. So just a quick show of hands here. How many of you are either majoring in business or considering a job in the corporate world? Okay.
Yeah, a good bit of you. And I don't know about all of you, but when we were in college, Allison and I felt a little nervous and anxious about entering the corporate world as people of faith, and we just didn't want to lose our identity as a Catholic in a secular corporate world, but just didn't really know what that integration was going to look like, or like how our faith and work would actually interact at all. And yeah. So both of us are now just a little over 3 years into our careers post-grad. So we wanted to use this time today to share with you 5 things we wish we would have known before we started our corporate jobs. But before we do that, let's do some quick intros so you guys can get to know us a little bit better. Claire, do you want to start? Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Claire. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, and went to college at Miami University. Yeah, where I studied information systems analytics and entrepreneurship. And now I have a job in consulting in Chicago. And and I work in healthcare mergers and acquisitions, doing buy-side diligence, sell-side advisory, and post-close work.
Yeah, and as I said before, I'm Allison. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. And then I moved to Chicago and went to college at Loyola University. I majored in accounting and information systems and minored in marketing. And I also work in consulting, actually at the same firm as Claire, but I work in our technology and experience division. So I help different clients basically implement new technology, and it helps them better connect and serve their customers. But enough about us. Let's tell you a little bit more about how this podcast even came about.
Yeah, so my senior year of college, I got the opportunity to take a faith and entrepreneurship class, and that was really the first time that I had thought about my faith, how my faith life would look in a corporate context. And honestly, I had been dreading work my entire life. Like, I was so worried about graduating and just working at a desk for 40 years and just like watching my life pass away. And I just didn't understand or couldn't imagine how work could be anything like my amazing 4 years in college until I took this class. And one of the biggest things that I learned was that in Genesis, when God created Adam and Eve before the fall, he gave them jobs. Their job was to work and tend for the garden. And, so when the world was perfect, humans still had jobs. And so I think that was a huge turning point for me. And really all of the negative things that we see come from work are just, ways that evil has crept in different ways. But at the core of it, our work is meant to be a good thing. And this was really just a huge light bulb for me, and I was so inspired. And when I moved to Chicago, I started an Instagram account called Corporate Catholic to just bring other people along with my consulting journey.
Yeah, and it was around the same time that Claire and I first met. So we actually both started at the same time at our current company. And through a mutual friend of ours, we figured out that we not only lived in the same apartment building, but we were literally 1 floor apart in a 34-story high-rise apartment building in Chicago. So kind of crazy and definitely a God moment. But it was really at a time where I was desiring to find Catholic community, especially having just left college. And so as Claire was kind of telling me about her inspiration for Corporate Catholic, I knew then and there that it had to be a podcast. And so I told her that, and it took a little bit of convincing, but fast forward 2 years and 54 episodes later, and here we are now at Seek doing our first live podcast.
Yeah. So as you can probably tell, we're pretty passionate about this topic, but God's also passionate about work. The concept of work is mentioned over 800 times in the Bible. And so this is just something that needs to be talked about, and is just such a pivotal time in your transition from college to post-grad life. So we're just really excited to dive in. And as we prep for this episode, we were just thinking back on when we were in college and just thinking like what we wish we would have known about the corporate world. So, that's what we're ready to get into, and let's get started. So number one is that your first job doesn't define your career. And I don't know about you all, but anyone know someone that just knew what they wanted to do with their life from like the age of 5? Like they were just like woke up and they were like, I want to be a doctor. And their whole life they knew they wanted to be a doctor, and they've had this whole plan, and it's just been so great for them, and that's amazing. But I was just never that person. I was always just someone that was like, yeah, she's good at this, she gets good grades, I'm okay at sports, but I was never someone that just really had like a defined skill that I could like tap into and be like, that is what I'm talented at, and like that is what I should do for a job. And so like coming to college, it was just kind of challenging, where I feel like everyone is saying, follow your passion and like find that thing that is uniquely you, and then use it. And it was just really hard for me to identify that. And a professor of mine told me that he didn't really feel like he had found his passion until the age of 50. And I think that, passion is a gift, and it's a gift that some people are blessed with, but really what we all are looking for is purpose. And our purpose is to know, love, and serve the Lord. And that's something that you can do in any job, in any situation that you're in. And I think, if I had known that, I just would have had like so much less pressure on myself, because really like your first job, if we just reframe the expectations of our first job, your first job is to know how to work, just learn how to be an employee, to gain experience in something that you've never done before, to love your coworkers, and to know, love, and serve the Lord. And you can do that wherever you are. So if you find something that you're passionate about, that is so incredible, but that should not be a qualification for your first job.
Yeah, and this even extends past your first job too. When I took this first job that I have now, it really was my dream job. I was so excited about it. And when I started working, I was like, I'm like gonna work here forever. This is great. I love it so much. And I still do love my job, but the past year or so, I've kind of felt this tug of that, I'm not sure that God has me here forever, but I don't necessarily know what the next move is either. And that's okay too. And so one thing that I've been trying to do is to just take that to prayer of, take the pressure off trying to figure out like, what's my big passion? What's my ultimate purpose? And instead ask, what's my next step, or where does God have me next? And each job and each role you have is a stepping stone to where you're meant to be. And another thing I would encourage is talk to people who are very well seasoned into their careers, or maybe have that dream job that you have, and ask them about their first or second job out of college. Because I think you'd be surprised that a lot of people that have these really glamorous jobs had jobs right out of college that were vastly different from what they're doing now. So I know in college we had a lot of guest speakers at my college, and I was always blown away by their first couple jobs out of college, and it was just so different from what they were doing. So it gave me a lot of hope, and it kind of lessened that pressure of needing to feel like you have to have it figured out for that first or second job.
Yeah, and I want to do something that I'm passionate about, but I don't think I'm in a rush to do so. And I think as you just start your first job, or you through the classes you've taken at college, like you can see small areas where maybe you're like, that really interested me, or that this interested me more than this, and just lean into those areas as much as you can, and just follow that path. And at some point, you might find something unique to you. But yeah, as we've talked about it, your first job is just, take the pressure off and just take something that, fits some qualifications of maybe like location and, maybe a pay that can support your lifestyle and maybe some values, and focus on those things rather than maybe the job description and the role itself. All right, so number 2 is that the corporate world needs you. And I think that it's really easy to look at corporate America as this just large, big bad wolf of sorts, and I just want to stay as far away as possible. But, I'm sure we're all well aware that the corporate world makes a ton of decisions for the world that we live in today, and we're just impacted so much. Like, for example, even just, pharmaceutical companies creating, the medicine that we take, or impacting the healthcare industry a ton, or a lot of the companies that you may well know and love are owned by private equity, and like those are large corporations just with a lot of money and maybe not always the best intentions. And so there's just a lot of different corporate roles impacting the companies and the products and everything that we use on a day-to-day basis. And Catholics need to be at the board. They need to be at the table and being able to be there and have an opinion and have an impact, so we can make change. I mean, no change is going to happen if we just kind of separate ourselves and do our own thing and hope that and pray that it'll change. Like, there needs to be some people on the ground actually advocating for change, and doing so in a way that you don't have to go up to the board and say, I'm Catholic, but they're going to respect you. You've worked there, and they respect your ideas and your credentials, and they say, like, this person knows what they're talking about, and we respect them. And especially with what we talked about, being seen, known, and loved, just being a Catholic is so attractive in a corporate world, and others are just really gravitating towards that love and kindness that you have, and bringing that to the corporate world. It's just very needed. And I was talking with a missionary a few years ago, and they were kind of just talking about, whether they should stay in mission or go to the corporate world, and they just said, I really can't imagine myself having any more impact than what I already have as a missionary. And I just really have been thinking about that for years. And I've taken it to prayer, and I'm just so convicted that I know I am a missionary in my current role. Just the conversations that I've had with coworkers, and just seeing them and realizing that no one has maybe supported them in a certain way, or remembered their birthday at work, or just asked about their kids, or just shown them certain love. I know I'm a missionary, and so I really believe that you can be a missionary in any role. And, we are all meant to serve the Lord in different ways. And just because your job title doesn't say missionary doesn't mean it's not in your job description. And so if that's something that maybe you're dealing with, of deciding, feeling like you have a heart for mission and not sure where that plays, I just encourage you to, keep an open mind and take the words I've just said into consideration as well when kind of making that discernment process.
Yeah, totally. And it's so easy to just think that, all corporations and all companies are bad, but there are good companies out there. And so you may be thinking, like, how do I find those good companies that share the values that I have? And one thing that I think I would encourage you to do is just to, not just look at their mission statement on the website, because it's so easy for companies to paint themselves in a positive light and say, this is what we believe, this is what we live by. But culture is really lived out by its people. And that's something that I've really learned just in our first couple years working. And it's something that I love about the company we work for, is that the culture is so strong. And so if you want to see what a company's culture is like and what their values truly are, try to talk to people who actually work there. Whether it's maybe an alumni who you can connect with on LinkedIn, or just someone that you can get connected with. That's a really good way to see what a company actually values and what their culture is actually like.
Yeah, I think something that stuck out to me about our company is that they did a values-based interview, which I thought was like really unique. And it honestly got me thinking, as Allison was just saying about, find someone who actually cares what your values are too. Like our company had a values-based interview because they cared what our values were just as much as I was caring what my company's values were. And I think that's really important too, is there are companies out there that are known for their culture. Maybe try some of those first. See if there's companies that are kind of known for their culture, people that, were, able to just find their place. And and I think as mission, just another witness of in corporate world you can have mission is this podcast. So Allison and I were coworkers and are still coworkers, and if we didn't work in our corporate jobs, this podcast wouldn't exist. And now we're here at Seek, hoping to impact some of you. So I think this is just another witness as how, say yes to the corporate job if you feel called.
Yeah. All right, number 3, work is hard, but you can do hard things. So I'm going to state the obvious here, but work is not always fun. But Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 says, "Whatever you do, do your work heartily, as for the Lord rather than for men." And I love this verse because it really gives us the opportunity to take even the most mundane things, working on an Excel spreadsheet or building a PowerPoint or doing these things that seem to have no meaning, and giving them meaning by offering it up as a sacrifice, as a prayer, as an intention, or something that, has just been on your mind recently. And we have that opportunity to do that as Catholics. So we can find meaning and bring meaning into things that just seem meaningless. And I feel like the past couple years, God has really shown me that I can do hard things. So I've been on a project now for almost 2 years, and it just wrapped up shortly before Seek, so it's finally come to a close. But it's been one of the most challenging parts of my career. And this project wasn't supposed to be 2 years. It's not normal for consulting. But there were a lot of pivots and changes and a very difficult client to deal with that just made this project just keep going on forever and ever. And there were so many points during this project where I so badly wanted to just go to my career advisor and say, hey, just get me off this project. I don't want to be doing anything else but this. Or even saying, okay, I should just quit and just find a different job. But the thing that kept me in that job, in that project, was the team that I worked with, the internal team and the bonds that we had built over those years. Not only did we go through the hardest things together, but we saw each other through people getting engaged, people moving, and all these different life changes that we navigated in addition to just being on this project together. And so that's one of the biggest gifts I think about work is, as well as just those relationships and the bonds that you can build. And that truly is a gift from God, being able to show up and be there for your coworkers in that way. So I think it's so easy to get sucked into the negativity in the corporate world and make everything about yourself and I need to get this done, or this is, why is this person having me do this thing? And one of the things that kind of helps you get outside of that is focusing on how you can serve the people that you're working with.
Yeah, and I was thinking about our patron saint of this week, Joan of Arc, and just how much that she had navigated and just really felt that resistance through something that she was feeling called to do. So the Lord was asking her to lead a battle, and people laughed in her face, really, and she was only I think in her teens, so she was very young. I forget the exact age. And she was definitely probably, one of, if not the only woman out there. And so I really look to her as, mergers and acquisitions is a very male-dominated field. So I was just thinking about her, and not only was she young, but she also was just a minority in the situation. And there's going to be times where in your corporate role, you're going to feel like the minority, and maybe it's because you're the only Catholic in the room. And I just encourage you to, really think about St. Joan and how much she went through, and also how much resistance she had. So, she threw out this great idea, and it's like throwing out a great idea to your boss or, maybe your project group or your team, and everyone is just like, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. And there was just so much resistance, but she knew that God was calling her to, and so she just had to keep persisting. And I think persistence is a huge gift and a huge virtue that you can call on the Lord, and just have and ask for persistence through whatever you're doing. So when the Lord asks you to do something and you're like, it'd be so much easier if I could just stay at home. And I think about remote work is just so prevalent nowadays. And there's only so much impact that you can have through a screen. And I know that for years, people had to do remote work, but I would also encourage you that it's going to be harder to work in person. It's definitely, you have to commute. You got to pack a lunch. You got to, say hi to people awkwardly when you get water or coffee. But the benefits are just so great, because you end up interacting with people in such a new and different way than if you were just working remotely. And yeah, I guess that's just an encouragement too, because I feel like working remote, it just seems so glamorous. Just being at home and kind of having the autonomy to do whatever you want. But really, you're not going to impact people, and two, you're not going to learn. You need to be there. And, remote work has actually impacted us as younger consultants, because a lot of the older people are staying home with their families, which is amazing. But also we're not getting as much mentorship as young people. And, that's something I've tried to bring up to my mentors and just thank them when they are in person, because I'm thank you so much. This means so much to me. And I'd encourage you all as well to not, be complacent and not take a step back, but to take a step forward and say, I'm here. I want to learn as much as I can, and I want to be in person. I want to ask questions. I want to impact others, and I want to show up. So encourage you, and if you're experiencing any resistance, just to really ask for St. Joan of Arc's intercession, as she really has gone through so much push and pull through her whole story.
All right, number 4, 40 hours of work could be 40 hours of prayer. So this is kind of a crazy statistic, and I don't like to think about it too much, but the average person will spend 1/3 of their life at work. I know, kind of crazy. That's a lot of time and a significant portion of our lives. And so it can be so easy to just compartmentalize our lives into, okay, here's my work life, here's my personal life, here's my spiritual life, going to mass and prayer and all those things. But especially when it comes to work, if we truly set aside every other part of ourselves, we're missing out on a huge opportunity to show up as a witness to our faith at work. And I know you may be thinking, how do I show up as a Catholic at work? What does that look like? And I think, it can be kind of a taboo topic of, I shouldn't talk about faith at work, those things should be separate. And I think my opinion of this was really shifted actually just a couple months ago. So who here listens to Spotify? Okay, yes. So I'm a big Spotify person, and one of my favorite days of the year is when Spotify Wrapped comes out, right? And you get to see all of your top artists, your top songs, your top podcasts. And so I was at work, and I was sitting with someone on my team, and this was a girl who was not Catholic. I had never brought up the fact that I do a podcast before, but she had followed me on Instagram, and I posted about the podcast before. So I imagine she heard about it through that, but we had never talked about it before. And she's like, hey, do you want to watch my Spotify Wrapped with me? And I was like, sure. I love to see what other people are listening to. And so she has her phone up and she's going through, and it gets to the section where it shows you your top podcasts. And number 3 on her list was the Corporate Catholic Podcast. And she was like, oh yeah, like I listen to your podcast. And I was like, wow, like we've never even talked about this before. Like I didn't even know. We've been working together like 2 years now. And it was just kind of a crazy moment. And, there was other people on my team there and they, kind of chimed in. They were like, wait, you have a podcast? Like I didn't know this. And for so long I was just, not that I was trying to hide it, but I was just scared to bring it up. I didn't think people would care. And also I just felt like it was a very vulnerable thing, like the things that we talk about sometimes, I'm like, I don't know if I want my coworkers listening to that always, but after that, at a happy hour, like everyone on my team was just asking about it and saying, why did you start this? Like, what do you talk about? Who do you interview? Like, what inspired you to do this? And just express such curiosity and interest in it. That I just was blown away, and it really just changed my perspective, and it made me realize that, when you work with people and you build relationships with them, you want to learn everything about them. You want to understand what they like and what's important to them, and that includes your faith, and I would do the same for someone else as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think that it can be hard to kind of bring up faith at work. And I think something that I just really try to do is to be truthful. So it's like someone asked me what I did this weekend and I went on a retreat. Like I tell them I went on a retreat because it's how I would answer the question. And it's not like I'm trying to bring up faith. It's just that they genuinely asked me what I did, and that is what I did. Like my faith is a huge part of my life. I'm constantly doing stuff related to it. So some of my coworkers, I did like one of those on Holy Thursday, like the 7 church bus tour, like, on like the night of Holy Thursday. And like some of my coworkers still talk about that. They're like, Claire and her bus tour, she loves that. They're like, what church did you go to again? So it's just fun to, kind of just try to be yourself as much as you can when being with people. And even if you don't know them that well, they might ask you simple questions, but, I try really hard not to hide, but I also am not like, I say enough where they're like, they know I'm Catholic, and if they want to ask and learn further, then people have. And if people, that makes them uncomfortable, then, maybe it's just something that they know about me, but we haven't discussed too much further. But yeah, I also want to encourage everyone to, one, if there's an employee resource group at your work, to get involved. So there was actually like an interfaith employee resource group at my work, which was really amazing and just something I didn't know existed in companies before joining one. But there, it was kind of just an interfaith group, and I kind of just stood in the background the first year and just kind of saw what was going on. But then the second year, I was like, there's not a Catholic specific group, so I just asked and said, could I start a Catholic group? And they said yes, and we're small but mighty, and trying to grow, or we each year, and we pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet every other Friday, and sometimes no one comes, and sometimes it's, we get a group to come, and it's just like it's such an amazing experience that I've actually been able to like pray with my coworkers, on our laptops, like on our like work computers, and it's like actually allowed from my company, which is just such a gift and such a blessing. And other ways that you can maybe allow your 40 hours of work to just be 40 hours of prayer is just kind of that pray without ceasing. Like just say a Come Holy Spirit before your meeting, say a decade of the Rosary. I like to pray the Rosary on my train ride to work. It's a great time to kind of just have 15 minutes to myself. Maybe you're dealing with something very specific. Search for a patron saint. I know there's, Saint Joseph, the worker. Jose Maria also has a lot about work, and JP2 has said a lot about work. So there's just so many people that you can kind of ask for intercession through your work, and maybe find a saint that's close to you and keep them close during your work day. All right, so The last one here is that God puts dreams on your heart for a reason. And I think that the main takeaways here are that nothing is wasted and to have hope. So, like we've said before, it's so hard to see the value in doing 40 hours a week on Excel from your bedroom, working remotely. Like, that is so hard. And but there are ways that we can know, love, and serve God, as we've talked about. But also, God is using the experience that you're having, in any experience, to help shape and write your future. And I don't know if any of you have ever read a book or seen a movie where, like, the very end, they bring in something from the very beginning, and you're like, oh, it all makes sense, and it's like all tied up so nicely in a bow, and it just like everything happened for a reason. And I really feel like God likes stories like that. I just think Alice and I have had several stories where, something that happened years ago that we thought meant nothing was like really preparing us for something that, we couldn't even dream of or didn't have any idea existed. And one that comes to mind for me is just, I had a random internship my junior year, and this was COVID summer, and I was all excited, and it was, at Notre Dame, and it was this like Catholic accelerator program for the summer, and so I was really excited. But then everything went remote, and so it was just me in my bedroom, so sad, but just doing what I could. And we had these speakers that would come and talk to the entrepreneurs. And so, like, some of the speakers that have been here this week, and just, other different Catholic business owners and different people were speaking to these entrepreneurs. And I was just like, wow, this is so inspiring. This is so great. But I didn't really take it anywhere. I just kind of was like, that was great. I loved hearing them. Put it in my pocket. Like, that internship seemed like just like such a random thing. Like, I've done nothing else ever related at all. Just started doing consulting and had all these other experiences. But flash forward years later, we've started this podcast, and I've actually contacted several of the people that have spoken about, at that internship, to be guests on the podcast. And I just feel like when we started the podcast, I already knew so much more about maybe the Catholic entrepreneurship and in business, some of the businesses that were out there just from that internship. And I was like, this is just so random. Just so, yeah. So, and, God is just using small things, especially like at this conference at Seek. Maybe you had an idea or a talk that sparked you, and that might lead you in a direction that you might not think about it for years, and then it might show up again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another example too is, this podcast now. So an experience that I had was, I've actually started 2 other podcasts before this one, and I wasn't exactly sure why I was doing that, honestly. Like, the first one was during COVID, podcasting started becoming kind of popular. I was bored. I was at home, as most of us were, and I was like, I'm just going to learn something new. I'm just going to see if I can figure this out. And I had studied abroad my sophomore year of college and traveled a ton and kept really detailed journals of, all the places I went and all the experiences I had. And I was like, I'm just going to start doing solo podcasts about each of the different places that I went, just to kind of, remind myself of those trips. And, it was a difficult time. And so I did that, and it didn't really go anywhere. It didn't turn into anything. And, it just kind of ended. And I was like, okay, whatever. It was cool to learn. And then when I was in college, junior, senior year, I started working for my college's entrepreneurship incubator. I've always kind of been interested in entrepreneurship, and I got a job there working for this professor who kind of spearheaded the whole program. And he was like, all right, it's still kind of COVID, and we can't do a lot of in-person events. So, we need to still do something, but it's kind of up to you to figure out like what you want to do. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we could just start a podcast and we can just interview different alumni who have gone on to start businesses and, do different things. And so I took that first experience and started a podcast from my college, just interviewing different entrepreneurs. And again, I graduated, it kind of ended. It was fun, but I had no idea that it would then lead to, what we're doing now and this podcast we have now, so.
Yeah, and I also, I had a podcast in college and it just died, and I had such a negative connotation with podcasts. And I worked with one in our entrepreneurship department as well, and then with COVID, it just kind of disappeared. And so when Allison came to me and was like, you want to do a podcast? I was like, absolutely not. I was like, that is the last thing I want to do. They just were failures in my mind. And I think that really what was happening was that I had a desire to do a podcast, and we both did. Early on in college, it just took really years for that full, for our full vision and God's vision to come to fruition. And we both dabbled and tried a few different things and then found our way here. And I think, some of those things that I thought were failures were really just things preparing me for what God was actually calling us to. And so, maybe you have something like that where you're just I don't want to think about that because I tried that and it didn't work, or that was just such a random experience. And you might not know why God has asked you to do that, or how you found yourself in that situation, but just be hopeful that God is going to use all of your experiences to form your unique path and your unique journey in your career. And something just to keep in mind is that success for Catholics looks different. And so for having hope in this year in this Jubilee year, and we're pilgrims of hope, is that if you're in a season of just deciding your major, deciding a job or an internship, some of your classmates are going to be looking at things and, maybe these prestigious jobs or just other things, and their vision of success is different than ours. And it's really hard to kind of remember that, and remember that we are pilgrims marching towards heaven. But our eyes are towards heaven, and we're really playing a whole different game than most other people that, maybe your classmates or your coworkers. And so I just encourage you that the road is going to be hard, because when we're doing the right thing, resistance is always going to be there. The evil one is always going to try to stop us. And so feeling resistance is actually a good sign that you're on the right path. And, I encourage you to really just keep prayer as the center focal point of your discernment and your career and throughout your career path, and just really remember that heaven is the real goal. Because a lot of your coworkers, and once you get in the corporate world, they're like, no, what's important is getting the next promotion, or what's important is that you work until midnight until this is done, because this is the more important than anything else you have going on. And I just really encourage you to accept any hardship that you endure, through prayer, and to just remember that, success looks different for us, and just keep that hope if you ever have any difficult times, and you'll be okay. So we can do it. We all are in this together, as Father Mike and Troy Bolton have said, so.
Yeah, and one other example and story I want to share before we wrap up is, just allowing God to work in ways that you wouldn't have expected. So I know a lot of you are probably maybe looking for internships right now, or have done an internship. And I had an internship during college that I absolutely hated. It's I went into this internship and applied for it, and there were multiple locations, and I thought I was going to be in Chicago, which is where I went to school, and I put that as my preference. And turns out they ended up sending me to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is a very small town. And I just wasn't expecting to be there. I was very upset. I was like, no, I wanted my first summer in the city. All I wanted to do is just be in the city and experience, everything that's going on there. And so I had a lot of resentment going into it, but I didn't have anything else lined up. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And so I ended up going. I didn't love the work itself, but what I got out of it was so many strong friendships. And I ended up being roommates with my current roommate now, and she's one of my absolute best friends. And so it's just crazy to think that if I would have, discounted that opportunity and just been like, no, this isn't what I wanted, I'm not gonna do that. Like, my life would be so different now, and I wouldn't have this person in my life. So I just encourage you to, it may not be the internship that you wanted or the experience that you wanted, but you never know how God is gonna work through that. So have hope with that as well. All right, so as we kind of wrap up here and, kind of finish doing some reflection on kind of our own careers, I hope you can tell that we definitely don't have it figured out either. But what we have done is just start the conversation. And, with this podcast, that's truly what we are trying to do, is to just have these conversations. And it's helped us so much. And so I encourage you to also have those conversations as well about work and your jobs and your coworkers and all these things that impact our lives so much as you navigate that transition to post-grad. And, as you can see today, we are so passionate about this topic, and we truly believe that God cares about your work and he cares about your career. And so we hope today this kind of eased some of your maybe anxieties and worries about pursuing a job in the corporate world. And also just encouraged you that you don't have to work in ministry to be a witness and an example of your faith in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. If there's a topic that we didn't touch on today that you were hoping that maybe we would talk about, we encourage you to maybe check out some of our other episodes. We do a lot of guests as well, and many of them have booths here or have been walking around, so there may be someone interesting that you might want, or another topic that you might be interested in, so encourage that. And we will also be hanging out after the podcast, so please come say hi, and we have stickers, and would love to meet you. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode recorded live at Seek. Miss the conference or want to relive your favorite moments? Seek Replay has you covered. Access powerful keynotes, inspiring talks, and exclusive content to take your faith deeper anytime, anywhere. Head to seek.focus.org/replay to download now. And don't forget to join us for Seek 26. Check out seek.focus.org for more information and to register.